Roy went out in the green room, we call it there. You know, they got the padded seats and everything. He brought one of those chairs in and put it in his dressing room. And he called it the Johnny Russell chair. And whenever I came in, if somebody was sitting in that chair, he asked them to get up. The only person he wouldn't ask to get up was my mother. And I said, well, Roy, she's sitting in my seat. He said, well, you ask her. But then one night I came in and he had his chair and he was facing this guy. And they were really in conversation. And I went over and I stood by Roy and I went, and the man was sitting in my chair. And Roy looked at me and he wouldn't say nothing. And I said, Roy, and he looked at me, he still wouldn't say anything. Finally, the man said something about, he felt like something was happening that he was involved in, but he didn't know what it was. And so Roy finally said, well, to tell you the truth, that's the Johnny Russell chair, and when he comes in, everybody who's sitting in it, we ask him to get up so he can have a place to sit down. So he said, well, let me get up. I don't want to break tradition. And he got up, and I sat down in the chair. And when he left, when he walked out of the room, Acuff looked at me and he said, you realize he owns every chair in here. It was Mr. Galen.
That's your spots.
He thought it was funny, and he got a kick out of it.
Hey, I got to tell one. When Hank Williams Jr. was doing the outlaw movement, at the very peak of the outlaw movement, and Hank was invited to sing on the Grand Ole Opry, and Roy said, I'm going to introduce him. I've known him as a little boy. So Hank got excited, called Manuel in Hollywood, and had one of those dusters from this, right from the outlaw movie. You know, boy, he was a beautiful duster, all trimmed up nice, and had a nice velvet collar and real long. And so Roy looked at him on the stage. He said, now, friends, here's a little rascal that I helped raise. Tonight he's appearing with long hair and a nice little raincoat. Hank Williams Jr.
Well, he was introducing me one night, and he said, here he is, and he told them where I was from, told them about my records, and he said, now here he is, Johnny, somebody said Russell, and he said, oh yeah, Johnny Russell. I came out and he said, Johnny said, I want to apologize for not being able to remember your name. I said, well, that's okay, Mr. Snow, that didn't bother me. And from then on, we were buddies.
You know, Bill, one time, he and Herman Crook, you know, would be on the stage a lot of times together there, you know. And Herman would walk out, and Roy said, Herman said, did you ever drink? Said, no, never did drink. Said, well, said, did you ever go out with any other women? And he said, no. Roy said, you don't know what you missed.
Bill, I think probably Osgood can tell you more about this, but I was along on the trip. Every time Roy would go into a restroom at a truck stop over here, one of the boys would slip a note under the door and say, God is watching you. So Acuff didn't know, of course, the boys were doing it. And they went to the truck stop, and one of them slipped a note under the door and said, God is watching you. And Roy had just about all he could take. So the guys had done left the restroom. He come out, and this big old burly truck driver sitting there, and he slapped him on the shoulder and said, I know God's watching me.